And welcome back to another Code Peterson GB Studios tutorial, working on our Prehistorio game. Previously, we placed these dialog displays that allowed us to display text in our game. Today, we're going to begin playing around with variables, and we'll use this in a few different settings. The variable could be used for counting the amount of lives that we have. Uh, that's going to be in this tutorial. Form of weapons. I want to have that in there. And also our key that we need to now exit this level. That'll be the third part. So we'll go ahead and make our image sprites for this tutorial first. And I'm using Piscal for this, 16 by 16 for the images here. And the first thing that I want to make will be just like a piece of ham. Now this has to be a certain color. So using my gbstudio webpage and these color requirements that we have, instead of using black, there's this really dark green that's on here. So I'll copy that. Then go to my color selector and paste that color in there. Then I can use my paint bucket. It's hard to tell just by looking it on there, but you could see it a little bit. It does change that up a little. Then inside, I might use this, copy that, paste it in here, and color that in. All right, now the background has to be a certain color in order for the transparency to work. In order to do that, I'll make a new layer and I put the layer above my old one. In order to move this new layer beneath it, I can simply, with my layer 2 selected, I can click here where it says move layer down, and now that layer is on the bottom. And this color, I need to use this really bright green. If you remember from our previous tutorials, it doesn't show up like this in the game. This bright green just means transparent. We'll go here to export and make sure it's PNG and that it's 16 by 16. And we'll download this. It will put this in our downloads folder. And I'll rename this so that it's not just called new Piscal. I'll call this one, we'll just call it meat. I'll take that and then I will paste it in here. All right, that's the first one we need to do. The second one we need to make. And for this, I can just erase it out of there. I want to make a graphic using that dark green again, the # 071821. That'll work. I have the green background. Everything else looks good. Now I can export this 16 by 16 as a PNG. Download this. Go back to my downloads folder. This one we will call bone. That in here. So can take out. All right. Those two are done. That's going to be our power up and our weapon. Another thing that I wanted to make was going to be the key. And now we will go and save or export. download, go to our downloads, and rename this as key. Got that. Can put that here. In our Prehistorio assets folder. All right, we should be good with that. I'll leave this open just in case I need to come back to it later. Minimize it. And we have these new sprites that we brought in, which means we have to bring them into the game. Here in gbstudio, we can click this drop-down menu and find where it says sprites. And if we bring this folder up here, we have meat on there, and we bone, and we have key. Just clicking and dragging that to that. And if you click on these, you'll see how they show up, how they're meant to show up. All right, once that's done, we can save. Then click the drop-down menu again at the top and go to Game World. Once we're in Game World, we're now ready to place these objects that we have brought in. One of them, click up here and select Actor. And maybe this will be for the weapon. Click right here. And if we click here for Actor, then we can find where it says, set that up there on the top. Bring in another actor. Maybe this one will set it like, we'll kind of float here. Testing purposes. Or we can even have it set right there. There's our key. And now we're ready to begin coding. Go here and go File Save. All right. So the first thing that we can do is come up with a variable here that works with our key and the door. All right. And if you remember in our last tutorial, when we were working with our dialogue, we changed up this trigger at the end to where now we just get this text on here. Now, what we can do is we can actually make it to where this key triggers a variable for us. All right, so if we select our key and we give this key a collision group, we'll just say group 1. And then we can choose what happens when it's hit by something. All right, when it's hit by the player, we'll click on here and we are looking for variable. I'll search for variable in there, and when I find this, I'll say variable increment by 1. So it's going to add 1 to the variable. I'll select that on there, and then you'll see it puts local variable 0 on there. If I click on that and I go down here to global variable 0, then it's going to add 1 to that variable. Now we can add event, and we'll search for compare, and compare if variable compares with value. I will click on that, and what we'll do is we'll say if it is greater than 0, and in the drop-down menu, we want to compare it to our global variable 0. If it's greater than 0. Then what we will do, if this is true, is we'll click here to add event. We'll go to change scene. We'll go to game over. All right, now what happens if this is not true? In other words, else. In that case, then, we will bring this display our text. We'll click and drag that and bring that into our else. Make sure it gets nested in there. Go. All right. This is what happens if it's true. This is what happens if it's false. I should also bring this stop music part up here. Bring it in here into if this is true. Because if we come into collision with it and it's not true, I don't want the music to stop in that case. All right, now I can go File and Save. And let's give this a quick test. See how it's working. All right, so it tells me I can't enter in there. I go up here. I get the key. And now I go in and it goes to game over. Now the key was still remaining there, which is not really what we want. So back here, when I select my key, I can go up here, and when I increase the variable, I will add another event, and this will be actor deactivate. All right, and if we test it now, okay, we'll go here, doesn't show up. Go up here, got the key, it disappeared, and there we win the game. All right, that's our first example of how we could use a variable with an object to open up the door. Pretty cool. Now, how about another example of a variable? This one will be with the power up. What we'll do, we'll go up here to our meet sprite, and we'll give this one a collision group 1. And when it's in collision with the player, don't want to forget this time of actor deactivate. That'll be the first thing. And now we will go variable, and let's add this one, set variable like to a value, variable set to value. Here we go. All right, and this one we'll click the little drop down menu. We'll find our global variables, and this will be variable 1. And we will add, I don't know, we'll say 3. All right, the next thing we have is by selecting our level 1 here so we can have access to our caveman sprite sheet here. Attach script to button. All right, and A makes us jump. B is one we haven't used. So we have when B is being pressed, and then we want to add an event. So we'll click on this event. So we'll search for variable again. If variable, compare with value. And in here, we're going to find our global variable 1. And we'll say if it is greater than 0. And then we will find launch projectile. We'll find our sprite sheet, and we want to throw the bone. And animation state, we'll say default. The source is coming from the player. The lifetime is how long you want that sprite to be on the screen for. So like 1 second, it'll travel 1 second before disappearing. And then destroy on hit, that looks good. And then we'll add another event to this. And this one is going to be variable decrement by 1. Before I test this out, I do want to switch this up where it says direction. There is a, I almost forgot about this tiny button here. It's actually kind of hard to see when you click on that. Then we can change it and say actor direction. All right, now I think we're ready to try this out. Let's try this out. All right, so I go up here, I can throw those bones, and we're having unlimited bones to throw on here, which we don't want. All right, let's close out of that and look in here. Oh, because I want to decrease not my local 1 by 1, but I want to decrease my global by 0, or global variable 1. All right. Now every time we throw one, it'll remove 1, and then eventually we'll get to 0. Let's try that again. Save and play. And I'm pressing the X button here. Nothing's happening. It's not firing anything. I come up here. Now when I press this 1, 2, 3, now when I press it, because I'm back down to my original value, which is 0, so it's not going to allow me to throw those anymore. If we want that bone to destroy the dinosaurs, then when we look at our collision groups here, we have collision group 3 is for our projectile, which is the bone, and when it collides with player 1, and you can choose multiple ones here, it just kind of depends. My enemies are all on collision group 1. So then when I go here to my dinosaur, you can see it's collision group 1. And then we have these on hit, like what happens when it's hit by the player, what happens when it's hit by these different groups. Because the bone is from group 3, I'll select that. So what happens when the bone from group 3 is colliding with group 1, which is a dinosaur? Then we will go actor deactivate. All right, and then I can go in here to same thing for this dinosaur. Make sure I'm on group 3. Actor deactivate. And then I'll go to my third one. Make sure that I'm in group 3. Actor deactivate. All right, now if we run this program, I jump here, grab this bone here. And when I fire that, it destroys it and the bone. I still have 2 bones in there left. And there we have our trusty power-up situation here. One thing that I might say would be on this level 1 and on initial, I might also add an event here, and I might set variable or variable set to value, and I will find that global 1, which is how many bones I have on there, and I will set that to 0. So that way when I restart my game, I don't have leftover bones to throw. It'll reset that once we go in. All right, that looks pretty good. We have this key that works, set with a variable to open up that door. We have this this ham or whatever that we get, which gives us bones to throw at the dinosaurs to take them out. The last thing that we might do is we might just say, what happens when we come into contact with an enemy or these triggers? All right, if I select a dinosaur here, when it's on hit with the player, and we have, if we're up higher, then, we can destroy the dinosaur. But if we're not higher than the dinosaur when we come into contact, then we deactivate the player. What we might want to do instead of going to that game over screen, I'll change this. I will move this change scene to game over. Instead of deactivating the player, I'll remove that also. Take that out. All right, so we do know that the music is going to stop. We can leave that there. But I will add an event, and I want to compare a variable with a value. All right, and this one, we have it as local 0, but we will call this one global 2. This will be our third variable on here. And we'll say when it is greater than 0. And this is going to be our lives. So if we make contact with the dinosaur and we have a variable of greater than 0, then what we're going to do is we'll say actor, set actor position. And what actor do we want to move? We actually want to move our player. And for the X value, we'll leave it where it's at, but for the Y value, we'll say, actually right there, say we're going to start from the beginning again with this. But it will keep our progress. So if we had already picked up the key, it's just going to move us here. The key will still be gone. We'll still have that variable. It'll just be in here for it. If we still have bones left, it'll keep track of that because we're not changing the state of the game. All right, that's what's going to happen if it is greater than 0. And then we can go here to add event and decrement by 1. And what are we going to remove by 1? Well, we're going to take our variable 2. Subtract that by 1. Else, what happens if it's equal to 0? Then in that case, then we'll go into here. We'll find stop music. And then we'll add an event. And we will go to change scene. And that's going to change to our game over screen for us. When we click on our level 1, we can also, we're on initial here, say add event. We can find variable set to value, and this will be our global variable 2. And we'll say we're going to start with 3 lives. All right, now when we run this program, run into our dinosaur. Took us to the game over screen. That's not what we was looking here. Let's remove this stop music here. So these I actually to nest into this else statement. So I didn't click and drag it all the way. That is one thing you kind of have to be conscious of. That happens to me a lot. So make sure that else is expanded. Click and drag events. All right, now let's try it. Okay, so now we are back at the beginning again. Here's our third one. And when we did it, we have game over. Now that's kind of hard to keep track of. What we can do is when our player gets moved back to the beginning, moves one off of that score, we can add an event in there. Let's go dialogue. And then we could type in there remaining tries. And if I put a $sign in here and I type in variable, and variable 2 is the one that we have used, then you'll see it turns that green in there. Now let's try running our game here. Remaining tries 2. Remaining tries 1. Tries 0. And then there it is. Now what I would do, depending on how many different enemies I have, I would then need to add this new script here, which is going to be my if else, or what all happens in my else statement here. So up here is what happens when I successfully land on the enemy. This is what happens if I don't successfully land on it. Well, then what's going to happen is if the variable, which is my lives, my variable 2, if it's greater than 0, then it's going to move the player back to the beginning. And it is going to take 1 away from that variable, removing the life. And then it's going to show a dialog on there of how many tries I have remaining. Game continues on. If the game is less or is equal to 0, then it stops the music and it takes me back to my game over. So I would make sure that that section on there, this else area, is going to be found on the rest of my enemies and also on this trigger down here where I land down at the bottom. It's important. That's what I'm going to do with my game. I'm going to kind of fix those things up and make sure that no matter what, because right now it only works for the first dinosaur, that it'll fix those, and then we'll kind of be ready for our next lesson. So again, this one was a little bit longer, but we were playing around with variables, and you can see how this totally changes our game from just a simple, run through and get to the end. Now we have a mechanism where we have to use the key to open up the door, where we can pick up this power up and it gives us some things to throw until we run out. Those items destroy the enemies on the field, and if we collide with the enemy, we lose lives. It shows it in our dialogue, and then when we run out of them, then we start the game back over. Hopefully you enjoyed that tutorial. Let me know if you have any questions, and I appreciate you for watching, and keep throwing out ideas for me for things to try down the road.